Hi everyone, welcome to THT, and today I would like to show you my meta overview for set 4 after the huge series of ban, the biggest ban we've ever had with Django, DJ, and Triple Dark Raid. So obviously, as a result, the meta is going to be very different from what we saw from the previous sector qualifiers. And after a few weeks, I feel like I have a good feel about what are the decks we can expect. I thought I wanted to share with you in this video, so then you can kind of have an idea of what to prepare against whenever you're going to be heading off to the regional qualifiers and other tournaments that you're going to be attending for the remaining of the season. So before we start this video, I just wanted to let you know that this video is sponsored by Card Market, the biggest marketplace in Europe to buy and sell Star Wars Unlimited cards. And as usual, I'm going to start with my overview in terms of the different decks that I've decided to include in this tier list. And my first ranking is not a ranking of popularity, but rather a ranking of playstyle. These are the different style of decks that you're going to be encountering, each of them requiring a very specific set of answers. So on top here we have the aggressive decks, which are mostly trying to put pressure on the opponent, mostly ignoring what they're doing. If you're on the left-hand side, the most aggressive one to the most controlly one. So Kazuda, for example, and Garsaxon have a bit more interactions than Sabine Yellow. So this is like the pure aggro deck. A new category of deck that we've never seen on the tier list being included is the aggro combo decks, which I feel like Rex Green is, in my opinion, the first combo decks that is actually competitive. I think that you can bring to a tournament and you can do very well in a tournament with this, assuming there's the right meta for it. It has obviously a lot of counters, but I think it's a deck that if you would be mistaken to ignore it, because it's a deck that can have a really decent matchup against a wide variety of different decks. So I can see a world where a deck like this can do very well, and so I just wanted to include it in this tier list. Then we got the tempo decks, which are obviously aggressive decks with a lot more interactions, the bounce, the discard, and everything to kind of protect the units and kind of put pressure on the opponent. And on this we have, I think the most tempo-y of the tempo decks is obviously the Kazuda Yellow, and then we got Han Red. I think Han Red is, in my opinion, the version of Han that is benefiting the most, that is the least hurt by the DJ ban, because it's a deck that was already accessed to a lot of 3/5s, notably with Cassian. So it doesn't mind. It goes from basically having 9 3/5s for 3 down to 6, which is not that big of a deal. And it's a very aggressive deck, so it didn't mind the DJ combo as much. Han Yellow was originally the most powerful version of Han, but it got nerfed really hard by the ban of DJs. So it's obviously a deck that I still expect to be a meta deck, but it's not going to be nearly as dominant as it used to be. And then we got the Queenland Red, of course, is in the tempo categories. Then we go into the mid-range category, which are decks that are clearly kind of balancing between being aggro or control. The decks can be played aggro or control depending on the situation, and they have both options to play on both level. And from this we go from the most aggro of this is the Boba Yellow all the way up to the most controlly of them, which is the Piet Red. And so mid-range is obviously very well represented categories. As you can see, lots of mid-range decks that are very viable in the meta, and they all play very differently from one another. And then we got the soft control categories, which are definitely decks that are way more late game focused than the decks in the mid-range decks, and they often include some sort of ramp and really try to ramp things up. There's some ramp decks also in the mid-range category, but though, for example, I thought that Bosk Green and Piet could be really aggressive sometimes, so that you could basically squeeze those guys in the soft control category. But usually, but yeah, this is kind of where I was going to, and in this case, we still have the Kira Krennic Green, still is a very valuable deck. We got the Piet Blue that can be quite aggressive sometimes, but it's mostly a control deck. And then we got, of course, the Palp Yellow, which I still think is a very strong deck. Granted, you manage to dodge the aggro matchups. And then finally, we of course have the hard control decks, The least controlly of them is the Powerful Blue, because it has some ramp and some proactive plays. But then we got the Bosk Red, which is almost the Bosk Blue, sorry, which is almost entirely defensive, and then the most controlly of them. So here I put the new Thrawn and Cad, but honestly, Cad is kind of a bit more mid-rangey, to be fair. But then you can put like, this is kind of like an all category, kind of like, you can kind of put any sort of villainy, cunning, vigilance deck in there. This basically are all the hard controls playing cunning, basically, which are usually even more controlly than the in there. You can put like the old Thrawn, you can put Iden Yellow, you can put even the trench decks, which trench blue decks, which I think are decks that are exclusively played as control and can be really, really powerful against other control decks. Also, this can kind of regroup that category. So that gives you kind of an overview of the different playstyles or different things you have to be aware of, the different categories of decks you're going to be encountering. So now let's talk about my actual tier list. So this is my tier list that I'm going to go into details on the reason why I put those different decks in these different categories. But before we start, I just want to emphasize on the fact that this ranking is not a ranking on what I think are the most popular decks, the most powerful decks. However, it is a ranking of what I think are going to be the most popular deck. So it's not a ranking of power level, it's a ranking of popularity. So it's what I believe are going to be the most played deck in tournaments. And this information is very, very important, because depending on what people are going to be bringing, that's going to influence the way you're going to be building a deck. Because creating an actual list of what are the most popular, most powerful decks, first of all, it's very difficult, and second of all, the power level of a deck is entirely dependent on its meta. It's entirely dependent on what you're going to be facing. Every deck has its different sense of weaknesses. There's an environment that could make a deck very powerful. So I don't like making a list of what I think are the powerful decks, because I think it's, as I said, it's very, very difficult to do. It's very difficult to be accurate, and it's often not accurate because, as I said, the power level of a deck is just completely dependent on the environment. There are decks, for example, that are very well run, that they do well into everything, but they don't have any crushing matchup. There are sort of other decks that are extremely powerful against a specific style of decks, but then do very poorly against others. So all this makes it very difficult to rank. However, it is easier to kind of predict what I believe are going to be the most popular deck for various amount of reasons. So we're going to start here from the top here with the most popular decks. So my prediction is that the three most popular decks that we're going to see in the upcoming meta are going to be Quinlan Red, Cad Red, and Sabine Green. So Quinlan Red is a deck that was already very popular in it's the second most popular in the Django meta. It's a deck that was doing actually its worst matchup was the Django matchup. It's a deck that was doing very well against non-Django decks. So obviously now with Django being banned, it's obviously quite obvious that this deck is going to be very, very popular. Doesn't necessarily mean that the deck is going to be the best choice, because obviously the fact that it's on top of the chart mean that people are going to be targeting it more. And Quinlan Red is a very powerful deck, but it's never been a deck that has been targeted by the meta. If you pay attention toward the end, whether it was on set 3 or whether it was on set 4, Quinlan Red was never the center of attention. Now, for the very first time in its history, Quinlan is going to be the center of attention. Everybody is going to be looking to counter this deck. So for all that reason, I believe that Quinlan is going to have a tougher time performing, even though it has a very it's a deck that is really, really powerful. It has a lot of great upgrades from set 3, and I think that there are a lot of people who love playing that style of decks. The Jedi decks, it obviously is the best 4th row decks by far. So it is, for all those reasons, I think that it's going to be very popular. It's a very solid choice. It's a very safe and solid choice if you want to perform into a tournament. Next, there's Cad Red, another deck that I think is going to be very popular. I think it's a very powerful deck against anything that is not a control deck. I think Quinlan is a bit more well-rounded in terms of it can kind of beat everything, while Cad is a bit more specialized. It beats really, really well on aggro decks. It does really well against all the mid-range decks. It does a lot worse against control decks. So I think it's going to be very popular because I think it beats Quinlan, and I think it beats, as I said, it's just really well positioned against most of the mid-range and aggro decks. However, it is poorly positioned against soft control and control, so it's a bit more of a meta call, but I think it's going to be a very popular choice. Then we got Sabine Green. Sabine Green has always been popular. There's a lot of people who like to play Sabine, who love to play her. She's been, even when she was not so great in set 1, she was still heavily played, and now she is back on the menu because she was heavily countered by Django being banned, meaning that now she's back on the menu, and she's obviously a very powerful deck. It's also a deck that got a lot of very strong cards. So you talk about the Chewbacca, the Luke Skywalker, those really strong pilots. We also see the Sabine Masterpiece, which is, in my opinion, not a card that is great in a vacuum, but it's just one of the few cards in the entire game that you can ECL on turn 2 and as a 4/4 if you get a green unit, which is not that difficult to do, and it's a great answer to other space deck, which is something that Sabine was struggling against before. Now it has an actual answer with it. We also has Blue Leader, which is a great card, so it's a card that deck was already very powerful, got a lot of great tools, and now its main counters is out of the meta, making it obviously a choice that I think is going to be very popular. Then going into the tier 1.5, so once again, this is not like obviously rocket science here. You can definitely argue a couple of those being up in the tier 1 list, but once again, it is kind of my prediction, and I have to kind of categorize things for this to be understandable. Then we got Gar Saxon. So my prediction, Gar Saxon yellow, I think is very well positioned. It does really well into the Talking Towns deck in general because of the shielded units. Makes it very difficult to use Talking Town in the early stage of the game, and if Cad and Quinlan's cannot use Talking Town early on in the game, it makes it very difficult to clear out threats, and it makes it very difficult for them to get an early advantage. So I think Gar Saxon just does very well against those kind of Talking Town decks. It's also one of the cheapest deck in the meta. It's extremely cheap to put together. I don't think it's a deck that has a single legendary. I think the most expensive card of the deck is like DR44 Blaster. So it's a ridiculously cheap deck to put together, and it got an insane amount of support in the latest upgrade. So obviously it's not a deck that does well against everything. I don't think it does well against control. I think there's certain type of decks that can do very well against it, but overall I think it's a very well positioned deck, and I think it's going to be very popular. It's a very easy to understand strategy, easy to execute, and it's a very affordable deck, and all this is going to make it very popular in my opinion. Then we got Luke Skywalker. I think Luke Skywalker is a great mid-range deck. It's a deck that is capable of beating everything. It had an insane amount of tools from the new set. Colossus is just an amazing upgrade for the deck. It has a great amount of now the fact that people are playing Stella Guerrera in the main deck means that the deck has lots of ways to get card advantage and dealing themselves damage. It does well into aggro because it has loads of sentinels, and then Anakin is extremely powerful. It can just finish games in a few swings. And it's a deck that had gotten a lot of new tools against control. The control matchup used to be very difficult for Anakin, but now it's a lot better. Stella Guerrera in the main helps, but obviously you play, of course, there's a ton of great sideboard cards here between Stella Guerrera plus the heavy discard with the pillage, and then of course the Great Dragon and all this. So it's a deck that can really fix its control matchup if it wants to. So it's a very well-rounded deck that can beat a lot of things. Next we got Bosk Green. I think Bosk Green is also a deck that I think is quite popular because I don't think it's great against Sabine, but now it can play like the 33 HP base that really helps in this matchup. It's also a deck that I think does very well against mid-range deck in general. I think if you can dodge the Sabine matchup, I think it's a very solid choice. And I think a deck that's going to be quite popular, is quite fun to play with. Then we got what I believe is my prediction on what I believe is going to be the most popular version of Han is going to be Han Red. Han Red is the Han deck that got hurt the least by the DJ ban, for the reason I explained earlier. Just got a lot of 3/5s already thanks to Cassian. It's a deck that is very well rounded aggro decks that can kind of beat everything. Once again, it's very well rounded. It can be built to beat everything. So it's a very solid deck, and I anticipate would be and people who love this leader, which there are a lot of people, will most likely try to play Han Red. Then we got Palpatine Blue. Palpatine had gotten a tremendous amount of tools in the new set. Once again, the fact he can play Colossus, We got, of course, to be able to play Chronic and all those like when defeated units that you can play in the deck. Of course, we got No Glory, Only Results, which is a great removal. The deck just simply had a lot of support, and I think is stronger than ever. It still loses to aggro very hard, but it beats everything. So if you are confident in your ability to dodge aggro, to dodge like notably the Sabine decks, I think Palpatine is an excellent choice. Then we got the Kira / Krennic green. I think Kira is going to be way more popular than Krennic. But I put them both together because they're kind of the same deck, to be fair. Those kind of soft control decks, which I still think are very popular. I have to say ramp decks are a little bit worse because now there's a lot of people who are going to be playing Sham Syndulla in their sideboard. But I still believe this deck is very, very solid. And if you can build it right for the right meta, it will be a force to be reckoned with. Then we got Han Green. Han Green obviously is another Han deck that was always very popular and is now much stronger. Has been nerfed with the DJ nerf, but got a lot of new cards from Jump to Lightspeed, and hasn't been nerfed as much as Han Yellow by the ban of DJ, which makes it a very valuable option. And if people can find the right build for the deck, it's going to be a force to be reckoned with. And a very well-rounded deck that can kind of once again beat a wide amount of different decks depending on how it's built. In the tier 2 category, I've decided to put Bossk Blue. Some people might be surprised to see Bossk Blue so low in the list because I've actually put it on one of the most powerful deck in the set. It's also one of the decks that benefit the most from the ban. With that being said, there's two reasons why I didn't put Bossk Blue over higher in this list. The first one is like simply hard control decks, especially hard control decks that are not Palpatines, that are like very, very reactive, are not very popular. No matter how powerful those decks are, they're simply just, a lot of people simply don't want to play with them. They don't want to be playing like super long rounds in tournaments, especially in very large tournaments, regional quarterfinals. They don't want to be playing round. They don't even have time to go to the toilets between rounds, that kind of thing. So people don't want to have that kind of tournament experience. And this limits a lot the potential of the deck in terms of how much it's going to see play. Another factor as well is like I think Bossk is very, very strong when the meta does not expect it. But if you are in a meta where everybody is taking against it, then the deck is a lot worse. So even though I believe it's one of the strongest deck in the meta right now, I don't necessarily think it's going to be one of the most played, and that's why I put it in tier 2. Then we got another very like kind of grindy late game deck. It is obviously the Palpatine yellow deck, which is still quite popular and I think is going to be quite powerful. It got a lot of new tools from the new set as well. Then we got Boba yellow. So I made it myself very, very clear that I don't think this deck is very good. I already thought that the deck was just a worse version of Django in the previous set. And now that Django is banned, people are kind of thinking, well, let's play the Boba Yellow. The problem is that Boba Yellow got hit very, very hard by the triple dark raid ban. That this deck really, really heavily wanted to play triple dark raid. And the fact that this is no longer available is a huge nerf to the deck. So I believe this deck is extremely overplayed. There's a lot of people who love this deck for some reason. It's very, very popular. But it keeps saying over and over again that this deck is simply just not very good. It keeps underperforming in every single tournament it's been in, and with the ban of triple dark raid, I don't see this being any better. So to make myself very clear, I don't think this deck is very good. However, it's going to be very, very popular. So, and there's obviously certain type of decks that do very poorly against it. For example, Boba Yellow is very strong against hard control. That's because the indirect damage. So I think that Boba Yellow is definitely going to be a deck that's going to see a significant amount of play, and you should be prepared against it. You should know how to play against it, because there's going to be a lot of people playing it. And it's, even though I think this deck is way overplayed, I still think it's a good deck. So you have to be prepared for it, because it's going to be very popular. Then we have Han 2 Green. So Han 2 Green is a very, very powerful deck that got a lot of help from the new set. The combination with Poe Dameron, the fact that you can play Poe Dameron for 3 using the discount from, and then you can just ignore the damage because you can just put Poe Dameron as a pilot. So you get basically a 4/5 for 3 without almost any downside. 4/5 for 3 in space is absolutely insane. That's really, like, really, really powerful. And then the deck also got a lot of other tools, like for example, Blue Leader is absolutely amazing in this deck. So this deck is honestly very, very powerful and got a lot of new tools. The only thing that is holding it down is its weaknesses to Tarkington. And obviously two of the most popular deck in the meta, which is Cad Bane and Quinlan's, are going to be playing Tarkington. So obviously that's a big weakness for the deck. But outside of this, it is honestly one of the strongest deck in the game. So something that you should be aware of and you should be prepared of against. Then we got Piet Blue. Piet Blue is a deck that was not as strong as I initially thought. I really honestly thought that Piet was going to be one of the best leader in the set when it first came out. Forced to admit that one of the big weaknesses of Piet decks in general is that they are forced to be playing all in space. And that is a huge weakness against a lot of decks, including the aggro decks. So Piet Blue, unfortunately, not really good against aggro, but very good against the mid-range. So Piet Blue, I think, is going to be a popular deck. It's easy to play, it's easy to build, it's new, so it has some appeal from this, so it's going to have some appeal just for that reason alone. And then we got Piet Red, which is kind of like the same story as Piet Blue, but just more aggressive, and ability to close out game much faster by playing super early Devastators and stuff like this. So it's a really, really cool deck. A lot more able to close out games much faster than Piet Blue, but doesn't have the 35 HP base and doesn't have the package of removal. So kind of different, but they're both going to be fairly similar in terms of popularity, I reckon. Then tier 2, finally we got I basically put Luke Skywalker and Yoda on this little picture, but basically you can put in that category any blue, white, green deck. Yoda and Luke are simply the most popular. I don't necessarily think that Luke is amazing, but you're going to see a lot of them simply because people are going to be trying to grab their showcase. Their showcase for the sector qualifiers, the showcase Luke. You can also expect to see quite a few Vader Blue, because Vader Blue I still believe is the strongest version of Vader. But I kind of put this on the same category as Bosk Blue in terms of the deck, of what the deck offers. So yeah, either Luke or Yoda, this kind of like mid-range with loads of Sentinels that can give loads of shields. Yoda has also the kind of the combo aspect to it, which is also something interesting. They have shown to be very popular in the first two sector qualifiers. Those kind of decks were very popular, and I expect it to be the same in the new meta. Then in tier 2.5 we have the Kazuda decks. So Kazuda was very popular at the very beginning, and then we thought that the deck was being super hard countered by Django, and now since Django is banned, Kazuda I think has another chance to shine, and I think Kazuda decks are very underestimated. They suffer quite a bit against the Talking Town decks, which was kind of like, so it has kind of the same problem as the Han decks, that they suffer a lot against the Talking Town decks, but they have this ability to they suffer quite a bit against the Talking Town decks, but they are very, very powerful if you can against other decks. I think Kazuda will do very well against super aggro, super control-y decks, and they do very well against other aggro decks, especially the yellow version that can play Cunning and Mandalorian. So I'm expecting the Kazuda Red to be slightly more popular than Kazuda Yellow. The reason why I picked those decks are not going to be super popular is because they are quite expensive to put together. There's loads of legendaries that you need to be able to put that deck together, and they are also very difficult to play. So the combination of those three factors makes it so I don't think they're going to be very popular, but you definitely should be aware of them as you head into the meta. Then we got Han Yellow. I honestly don't think Han Yellow is the best version of Han anymore, because of the DJ ban. I think it's a huge deal for the deck. Not being able to play the DJ for 7 is a big deal. Not having as many 3/5s for 3 is a big deal as well. I still think it's a very good deck though, and I still think that there's some Han Yellow fans that are going to be wanting to play the deck. And maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Han Solo is much better than I think. then I think it's going to be much popular. Then I think I haven't really dived into the deck too much since the GG ban. Also, there's simply a lot of people who just don't want to play the same deck over and over again, especially if it's going to be a worse version of that deck. So for all those reasons, I believe Han Yellow is not going to be very popular, but it doesn't mean it's a bad deck. Quite the opposite. It's actually a deck that might surprise a lot of people and might actually take quite a few tournaments. Then we got the entire category of villainy, blue, yellow, art control decks. I don't think those decks are going to be very popular because they, as I said, I don't think art control is very popular as an archetype, but there's a few people who like to play those decks, and they do very it's a category of art control deck which usually does a lot worse against aggro, but does a lot better against other art control. So if you're in an art control meta, this could be a very good choice for you. Finally, tier 3, we got the Rex green deck. This is kind of a very cool and unique deck, but in the meantime, I cannot imagine people bringing it massively in tournaments because it has some really big weaknesses. It's a kind of deck that I think a lot of people will play for fun to see how it performs and try to get lucky on the matchup and try to get some good wins. But I don't necessarily think it's a deck that will see a tremendous amount of play, so that's why I put it tier 3. Then we got Han Blue, which is a deck that has already done a very major performance in the Liverpool sector qualifier. I think Han Blue is also a deck that I think has potential to do quite well, and it's also a very solid deck. Then we got Ray Red, not nearly as popular as Anakin Blue because it hasn't gotten as many tools, but I still think it's a really good deck that can do quite well. Sabine Yellow, also kind of like Sabine Yellow is definitely has not gotten as many tools as Sabine Green and has always kind of lagged behind Sabine Green, but it's a deck that can take a lot of people by surprise. It's quite a strong deck. And finally, I just wanted to give an honorable mention to a Daimyo Yellow, which I think is a deck was already quite good in set 3, and I think it has gotten a lot of great tools. I might be publishing a video in the future when I show my updated version of the deck, because it's a deck that really got a lot of new tools in the latest set. So here we go. So this is kind of my tier list. Let me know if there's any other deck that you think is going to see play. Obviously, I'm not going to be talking about every single possible decks that could be played. Like obviously that those are basically the deck that I'm expecting to see the most play. Once again, it's not a ranking of power level, it's a ranking of popularity. And I think it's knowing what is going to be popular and what is not going to be popular is going to be very important in order to kind of prepare your deck. So for example, you're looking at this meta, you're thinking, okay, I need to play a deck that can play well around Talking Town. I need a deck that can play well into aggro. I need a deck that has some good sideboard option against hard control. Like that, like this is kind of like the thinking process. I want a deck that can beat mid-range because there's a lot of mid-range deck in the meta. So yeah, think about like a mid-range deck that can play well into Talking Town. So that's like a lot of interesting things that you can kind of keep in mind as you are preparing to add to your upcoming tournaments. So just want to let you know that on card market you can pick up Luke Skywalker for €7. I just wanted to say that it's kind of nice to see rares actually be worth something. So one of the big impact that we had from the legendary being a lot easier to find is like it made legendary a lot cheaper, but it also made rares a bit more expensive. And I like to have a bit more of a balance between, like basically in a previous set you would be crazy to put on the top 10 card of the deck to have any rares in the top 10 would be crazy. It would all be legendaries. Now there's definitely some rares, very popular and powerful rares that can be worth more than legendaries, and this brings a lot of value to your boxes because now you can open your box and there's not only the legendary that you're excited to open, you can now be excited to open certain rares like Ahsoka, like Luke Skywalker, like No Glory Only Result, those kind of cards that you can open and will be worth more than the price of the booster you paid for, and I think that's really cool. I also just wanted to say that we've recently opened our store for Team Enigma, our merch stores. So if you guys want to support me in other way than watching my videos, and if you want to support our team, We are obviously going to be trying to compete at the highest level, try to do well at the Galactic Championship. So your support, financial support, will be super helpful for us to be able to pay, to make sure as many people from Enigma can actually fly over to Vegas and try to reestablish the balance, because I'm expecting a lot of American players will be in the Galactic Championship. So to try to make sure that the Europeans can also take part and put up a good fight, that would be great. Thank you so much for this video. Thank you for so much for supporting me. If you like the video, please like and subscribe, and consider buying one of our products. That will help us a ton, and I hope you really like the design as well. Thank you so much. I will see you next time.